program. This is our fifth year, and we're delighted. CIGA is an independent non-profit research and public policy institution that's based in Istanbul, Turkey. It's affiliated with Istanbul Zaim University. Its mission is to conduct high-quality research and analysis, educate the public and policymakers, train experts, and propose novel ideas and policy recommendations regarding global policies and relations impacting the Islamic world and the development and progress of Muslim societies. In the past 5 years, we've organized 10 international conferences and over 150 seminars, webinars, book discussions, workshops, and symposia. Today, we are pleased to announce the premiere of our new activity called Diwanniya, or Town Hall Meeting. It gives me an immense and great pleasure to have with us today in our first Diwanniya the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, His Excellency Mr. Imran Khan. He really needs no introduction, but the most striking thing about him is his ability to inspire millions of people not only in his nation but across the Muslim world and beyond. Perhaps no leader has been able to galvanize that many people in the streets across Pakistan since the founder of the state, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Today, we will ask the Prime Minister questions that will focus on international affairs, global politics, the Muslim world, and many other topics. But before we start our questions, I would like to thank our audience here who come from across the Muslim world, who would also participate in the questioning the Prime Minister. But before we do that, I would like to introduce my colleague and co-moderator, Mr. Awais Khan, who is a research fellow here at CIGA. He will explain the format of today's program and how it will be conducted. Awais.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to everybody. This is our inaugural Diwanniya event. It is an event inspired out of the tradition, Muslim tradition, in which public leaders bring together scholars, public policy experts, and students and engage in an open, on-the-record dialogue about issues of mutual concern. So today, I'm honored and esteemed to have all of these very bright minds and thought leaders from the Muslim world here gathered together with Mr. Imran Khan. The format of the session will be that we have collected a number of questions from online and from other platforms, and we have grouped these in 15 odd categories, and each category we will ask a question. It will take 60 seconds approximately on the questioner's behalf, and then we will have a back and forth conversation with His Excellency. Each question we hope to give an average of 5 minutes in response. So I welcome everybody, and without further delay, let's jump right in. Dr. Sami.
Thank you, Awais. Again, it's 5 minutes per question, including the questions and the answers, so we finish in the time that we're proposing, which is about 90 minutes. First of all, let me welcome again Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you so much for joining us. We really are delighted here to have you with us. The first question and the first segment involves world and regional politics, and the first question is about Russia, the United States, and the war in Ukraine. Some international scholars believe that the West, particularly the United States, has goaded Russia in its invasion of Ukraine. They argue that ever since the fall and disintegration of the Soviet Union in 1991 and up until perhaps 2017, we had a unipolar world which the United States exploited in order to expand NATO, turn as many countries in Europe to become Western liberal democracies under its tutelage, and further weaken Russia. This aggressive US strategy, they argue, has provoked Russia and is considered the main reason for the war in Ukraine. On the other hand, the majority of Western leaders argue that the main reason for invading Russia is an aggressive Russian policy where Russian leader Vladimir Putin wants to restore Greater Russia and subject some of the former Soviet satellites to Russia's rule and dictates. You've been a keen observer of world politics and dealt directly with world leaders. Which argument do you believe, and how do you see the end of this brutal conflict?
Thank you very much for inviting me to this, your first, I believe, inaugural session on question and answers. I want to thank CIGA for honoring me today, and I hope I'll be able to answer all your questions. Now, this is the whole Ukraine-Russian conflict. I happen to be visiting Moscow on the day when Russia decided to go into Ukraine. So, you know, I had a meeting that same day with President Putin. So I know the Russian point of view. And the Russian point of view is that we had repeatedly indicated to the Western countries that we would not allow NATO to come right onto our doorsteps. And their argument is that just like the United States would not want Russia to come in and say in Mexico and with all their weaponry. So the conflict from the Russian point of view has been triggered out of fear that if NATO moves in to Ukraine, which they felt should have been demilitarized or should have been neutral, they felt that then the security of Russia was at stake. And the other thing was that President Putin kept saying that in the past, Western leaders, American leaders, had all told him that, look, this will not happen, and they had given him assurances. And so unfortunately, he said that these assurances were broken, and hence the conflict. The Western point of view is very straightforward, that this is Russian aggression. It's invasion. It's coming into they invaded a country, and they're blaming Russia for all the destruction that is taking place due to war. So now my point of view, I basically feel that countries like Pakistan, we should not become partisan in this. You know, we should not pass value judgments on this or moral judgments on this. The reason, I don't feel that our countries should get involved in conflicts that don't affect us. And I'm talking about developing world, countries like Pakistan, which have 100 million people vulnerable, almost 50 million people below the poverty line, 50 million people above the poverty line. And so when we make moral judgments in conflicts, it comes at a cost for countries like us. So, for instance, we would have wanted cheap oil from Russia. We would have wanted wheat 2 million tons of wheat from Russia. A gas pipeline was arranged with a Russian company. So all that gets affected the moment you take sides. And you know, our neighbor India, which is a part of the Quad, which is a strategic military, economic military alliance with the United States, India abstained in this because they too felt that they needed cheap oil from Russia. And what this conflict has done, post the COVID situation, where already there was a commodity super cycle, and this conflict has raised energy prices to the level which is causing a lot of problems in Europe. We all know that in Europe they are suffering from gas shortage and energy prices spike. But in the developing world, it has caused a massive problems in our balance of payments, because it has just, the oil prices going up, I know they're coming down now, but that caused an enormous problem for countries like us. So therefore, my take on this, there are 2 points of view. We would like to abstain, my country, we would like to abstain in this. But I do feel that this conflict has caused massive problems all over the world.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer. The next question is about China, and Awais will ask that question.
Keeping with our theme about world and regional politics, we'd like to stick with talking about the great powers. For the past 3 decades, the power of China has been on a steady rise economically, military and technologically, among other spheres. It has certainly become a world power. Pakistan has also been one of its major partners, not only economically but also geopolitically. How will Pakistan maneuver between China and the United States, particularly in growing US pressure on Pakistan to take sides? How do you envision the role of China in a multipolar world and in competition with the US?
Well, Awais, the problem is that, when we are countries, again, I sort of falling from your first question, when we are weak countries, we developing countries are pushed to take sides. And I feel that Pakistan should not take any sides. I'm talking about our country. Because, why do we have to take sides? Pakistan should have good relationship with both China and with the United States. Similarly, I feel with Russia and the United States. For instance, that's the policy of India. I must say that I've always admired the way India remained non-aligned during the Cold War. I thought it was a sensible thing to do. I mean, when you become part of a bloc, that means that the whole other bloc is excluded from you. And of course, great powers do put enormous pressure on you to take sides. So let me first say that China-Pakistan relationship goes back a long time, 60 years. And China has been what we call always a friend in need. China has stood by Pakistan, whether it is on international forums, on politics. For instance, Kashmir is an issue, a United Nations resolution on Kashmir stating that there should have been a plebiscite in Kashmir for the people of Kashmir to decide whether they wanted to be with India or Pakistan. And that right was not given to them. But hardly any other country stands with us. China has always stood with us, and I must say, Turkey has stood with us. But even Muslim countries, despite knowing the injustice going on in Kashmir, just like in Palestine, they do not stand with us. Which is, by the way, one of the reasons I feel that when we are told to take sides in a conflict like Ukraine, why should we? When things that are important to us, the Western countries don't take a stand or moral stand on it. And so I feel that, I think we should be non-aligned in this. We should be neutral. We should be friendly with both. But about China, I have seen the development of China in the last 30 years. And I must say, what they have achieved there is no precedence in human history of what China has achieved. They have lifted 700 million people out of poverty in the last 35, 40 years. It's never been done in human history. And when you go to China, the rate of their development is phenomenal. And I just do not think that Western countries will be able to compete with them. Because, the electoral politics, it has its limitations. I mean, the amount of maneuvering a democratic government which comes about through electoral politics, you have a lot of limitations. In China, what is considered national interest, the people stand with the government. And what they managed to do, like for instance, shifting populations, I don't think that can happen in Western countries. So I just don't think that the other countries will be able to stop the growth of China. Their system of meritocracy. I visited China and I saw the way they bring up all their talent. And then their single focus, long-term planning. I haven't seen such long-term planning in most countries. Certainly countries like us, which every 5 years are supposed to have elections. So very rarely governments plan beyond 5 years. But in China, they have just planned so far ahead. And then they single-handedly pursue their goals. And I feel that, China is going to be the, I think it will leave everyone behind.
Thank you very much, respected Chairman. I cannot leave the issue of China aside as a Muslim think tank and not raise the plight of the Uyghur Muslims. On a lot of issues, Muslims around the world are concerned about the events that are happening in Xinjiang. Pakistan has been a champion of Muslims all around the world. How do we hold both of this in tension?
Well, let me say that, the Pakistan-China relationship is such that whatever the issues of Uyghurs, we have always, the Chinese have always preferred to speak behind closed doors. They're very, their system is such that they hate talking about sensitive issues like Uyghurs in public. So we've had discussions with them, and they give us a different side of their story, and there are always two sides of the story. And so, the conversations I've had with the Chinese government on Uyghurs, we have always, knowing the sensitivity they feel, we've kept that behind closed doors.
Thank you so much. I want to now ask one of our members here to direct the next question. Let me introduce Dr. Mubin Shah, who is the head of the Istanbul Kashmir House. Dr. Mubin Shah.
In the name of Allah, Excellency, it's a pleasure to talk to you directly today. Excellency, this is Dr. Mubin Shah, Kashmiri in exile. As far as we can tell, in its hour of need, Pakistan has all but abandoned Kashmir in everything but rhetoric. What is your and PTI solution for the people of Kashmir? When in power, how would you maneuver support for Kashmiri resistance movement, taking Ukraine as a model within Muslim world, with OIC as the biggest support factor to impose sanctions and back resistance of Kashmiris militarily? In these challenging times, what is Pakistan's solution to grave issues faced by Muslims in South Asia, particularly in India? Excellency, I thank you.
Well, Mubin, when I was the Prime Minister, we took a very strong stand for Kashmir. And I think you would have known that we have my government at least, on every international forum we spoke about the people of Kashmir, especially after 5th August 2019, when they took away the statehood of Kashmir, which was against all international laws. It was against the United Nations Security Council resolution, which clearly stated that Kashmir would have a special status until they were given their right of self-determination. So without giving them the right of self-determination, they took away the statehood. So we stood with the people of Kashmir, and we broke all relationship with India. And that has remained up to this point. It's the case now that we actually have broken relationship with India, and at every international forum we have tried to put pressure on them. Now, apart from that, what else can we do? Give them moral support them everywhere. But when you say, I don't know what you mean. I mean, do you think we should militarily go into Kashmir, which is obviously clearly not an option? There are two nuclear armed countries. It's not a Ukraine type situation. Pakistan and India, the moment there is a conflict, I think there is always a danger that it will go out of hand. In Ukraine, for instance, if Ukraine had nuclear weapons, firstly, this might not have happened, this conflict. But had it happened, the whole world would have been petrified of a nuclear war. So therefore, with Pakistan, India, military solutions are not an option. Short of that, what else can we do? Well, raise it on every forum, and it has cost Pakistan quite a lot by breaking away all diplomatic relationships with India since 5th August 2019.
So what kind of words of hope can you give the people of Kashmir? Because this is a very bleak picture right now.
It's, circumstances always change. I am a firm believer that, you just keep pressure. People of Kashmir have patience. They have given tremendous sacrifices. Almost, 100,000 Kashmiris have been martyred in the last 30 years, or just above 40, or around about 40 years. But you know, they are resolute. They're not giving up. And this will, sooner or later, the Indian government will have to restore their rights. At the moment, the people of Kashmir are just deprived of all rights. And what the Indian government hopes to do is to alter the balance, the demography of Kashmir by settling in non-Muslims into non-Kashmiris and Muslims into Kashmir. And what they hope is that eventually the balance will be changed, and when they have elections or plebiscite, there will be more non-Muslims who will then vote for India. So this is the game plan for India, but it's not working because the people of Kashmir have not given up. And I think the settlers find it very difficult to move into Kashmir in a hostile environment. And I really believe, I am a firm believer that Kashmiris will get their independence, their right of self-determination.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next question is about Pakistan's nuclear policy, and it would be asked by Dr. Nizar Krekish, who is the director of the Bayan Center for Studies from Libya. Dr.
Thank you.
Nizar.
Thanks. As the only Muslim state that has nuclear weapon, can Pakistan potentially provide a nuclear cover for the Muslim world? In other words, do you think Pakistan should put other nuclear power nations notice that they cannot use nuclear weapons against other Muslim states, because that would also constitute aggressive against Pakistan? For example, can Pakistan give a nuclear cover against Israel potential use of nuclear weapons against its neighbors? Is it strategic in the area or just restricted for Pakistan, this nuclear weapon?
Well, at the moment, first of all, let me tell you, I'm not a great fan of nuclear weapons, because I do believe in settling your issues. I'm not also a great fan of military solutions. For instance, I would never try and solve issues militarily, but for me it is basically for defense. I mean, if someone is going to take away your freedom, then that's when you fight for it and you use military. So the Pakistan military, the nuclear program has always been a defensive one, because India is 7 times the size of Pakistan. It has huge resources now. And the people in Pakistan have always been threatened by the idea that a bigger neighbor would just overwhelm the country. So remember, we've had 3 conflicts with India. And this was from 48, 1965, and then 1971. And so ever since Pakistan's had the nuclear program, we actually have had no conflict. So it gives the country of 220 million people security when you're facing a neighbor which is 1.3 billion people. And hence, it's a nuclear program for Pakistan is essentially defensive.
So just to clarify this point, if in the future you were Prime Minister and a Muslim country was threatened with nuclear weapons, will you take action or just stand by?
Well, I can't say right now that Pakistan would be able to stand up for other Muslim countries right now. I just think that, the idea of, I again repeat, the idea of a nuclear war, the idea that you will actually be face to face with another country with nuclear weapons is beyond my imagination. And I say this simply because, nuclear war is the end of the world. You must remember, it's a suicide attack on the world, because I don't think the world will be able to sustain or survive a nuclear holocaust. So, the answer to the question is simply that there are other ways that the Muslim countries can put pressure on the injustices that are going against the Muslim countries, and that is through the OIC. Unfortunately, right now, the OIC has not really fulfilled its role as an organization that would stand up for Muslim causes. Unfortunately, you know, there are too many self-interests. There is not enough, governments are not enough representative in the OIC. In other words, they don't represent the public opinion. So the public opinion all over the Muslim world is the same. They feel the pain of what is happening, injustices in the Muslim countries. But when you have governments that have no connection with the public opinion, then they're not bothered what the public opinion thinks. And hence you find very few countries which have spoken out for Muslim causes. Because only those countries where you have Muslim democracies, where you have governments representing the public opinion, only they speak out against the injustices, say, in Palestine and Kashmir and elsewhere.
Thank you so much. We're going to move on to our second segment, and this is a good segue to talk about the Muslim world and the Ummah. I have with us Mr. Naeem Jinnah from the center, who is the director of the Afro-Middle East Center in South Africa. He's joining us online.
Thank you, Excellency, in many of your speeches, you have equated Western intervention in Iran to how the West interferes in the internal affairs of Pakistan as well. And of course, you know, many of us believe that there's a personal issue here for yourself also. Since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, Iran adopted a kind of policy of independence, neither East nor West as they called it, and coupled that in fact with hostility towards foreign powers, promoting what it regarded as its version of an Islamic state. That country, Iran, has now lived under sanctions for 43 years almost. Sanctions, destabilization, etc., with the objective, of course, of regime change in Iran. From a Pakistani perspective, how do you view Iran? A hostile power, a potential strategic partner, a competitor? And I ask this question particularly in light of your earlier comments about non-alignment, I think, which is a very valuable articulation. And how exactly is Western pressure on Iran similar to that on Pakistan?
Well, in Iran during Mohammad Mossadegh's premiership, and his government was removed, and this is now documented, was removed by the CIA. And it was because an independent-minded prime minister took over in Iran and wanted to make policies for the interest of the people of Iran. And so we all, you know, we all know what happened to him. You know, there was this, first of all, there was this campaign, propaganda campaign against him in the media. Then it was the opposition parties were paid to do demonstrations against the government of Prime Minister Mossadegh, and then his own party members were given money to change party affiliation, and eventually it was the final was the army which removed him. So it was a very similar pattern followed when my government was dismissed. But you know, let me just talk about Iran. I find that it is most important for a country to live with dignity and self-respect. I mean, that for me is the most important thing. You know, we Muslims, you know, our oath with the Almighty is La ilaha illallah. There is no God but Allah. It gives us dignity, self-respect. We are not supposed to bow in front of anyone but the Almighty. And the Muslim countries, you know, when they become subservient or when they become client states, when they lose their dignity, you know, and unfortunately in Pakistan we have suffered from this. I have found the Pakistan's foreign policy, vast majority of the people of Pakistan have found it very undignified, because we have relied on aid and we stretch our hands and we get money or we fight other people's war, and then, you know, we participate. A lot of our own people die in this, and we do it for foreign aid or US dollars. And I think, you know, it has consequences for a society. Number one, the society never learns to stand on its own feet. Because only when you stand on your own feet do you realize your strength. But when you're always having crutches of foreign aid, just because, you know, you're trying to serve someone else's foreign policy objectives, you lose your dignity. And for me, the people of Iran might have suffered, but, you know, they haven't lost their dignity. They you know, we will disagree with, you know, maybe what their worldview is. We might disagree with their worldview of Islam, but, you know, you cannot disagree with them standing for their sovereignty. So, you know, I admire that about them.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Our next question comes from Maryam Khan, who is a PhD candidate at Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University and also a research associate at CIGA. Maryam, are you there?
Assalamu alaikum. It's really a pleasure to sit in front of you. I am personally a voter of PTI and I'll be ever. My question is regarding Afghanistan. It's been after 2-decade-long war of US against Afghanistan. Taliban have turned to power now, which wasn't supported by leftists in Pakistan because they saw them as a source of terrorism. Now, we Pakistanis are again facing a wave of terrorism, and Islamabad is on high alert. So how do you see the Taliban in Afghanistan, and how do you think that the current security threat which Pakistan is facing now has something to do with Afghan Taliban also? Also, you have supported a lot of you know, laws like blasphemy law and religion-based laws, but on the same time you have criticized a lot of religious parties which were in the coalition. So how do you see the role of religion in the politics? Thank you so much.
Okay, so first of all, you must differentiate between the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistan Taliban. The Afghan Taliban are completely different. You know, their aims and objectives are completely different to the TTP, which is the Pakistan Taliban. Who were the Pakistan Taliban? When the Afghan Jihad was conducted from the soil of Pakistan, it was conducted to what was called the tribal areas of Pakistan, or FATA. Now, these were areas adjoining the Afghan border. And all the sort of incursions into Afghanistan by the Mujahideen were from the tribal area. And a lot of the fighters also from Pakistan were from the tribal areas. And there were Pashtuns, which were the Pakistani. You know, you must remember, Afghanistan is 50% Pashtun, and 2/3 of Pashtun live in Pakistan. And most of them along the border, the eastern border of Afghanistan. So therefore, there was a lot of Pashtun sympathy for the Afghan Jihad. So hence, from the tribal area, the border adjoining Afghanistan, that's where the fighters used to go in, and the Mujahideen used to operate. So when come 9/11, Afghanistan gets invaded by the Americans. Now Pakistan government took this stand, which I opposed. We should have stayed neutral. They started supporting the US war on terror. And so the same people who had been fighting jihad against the Soviets because they were foreign invaders now were told that because it's the US, if you fight against them, it's terrorism. So they turned against the Pakistan government. And so what we had was, in tribal areas, the people turning against the Pakistan government, and they were called the TTP, the Pakistan Taliban. And so there were two different things. Afghanistan Taliban were not connected with them. I mean, they were connected vaguely, but not really. There was not real connection with them. So what happened was that after Kabul fell to the Taliban last August, the Pakistan Taliban were then asked by the Afghan Taliban to go back into Pakistan. And unfortunately, that was a great time for us to, my government was already negotiating with them so that we would do a resettlement of these people, because there were about 40,000 people which were moving into Pakistan, amongst them about 5 to 10,000 fighters, but their families too. So unfortunately, when my government went, the eye was taken off the ball, and the new government and the new and the setup, our military establishment did not pay enough attention to what was happening with the resettlement of the Taliban coming in. And so therefore we have this wave of terrorism coming in now, and this is all along what was the former FATA, the former tribal areas, because they've got merged into Pakistan. So we have a wave of terrorism in Pakistan right now, and this needs to be dealt with before it goes out of hand. Now I come to what you're talking about, religious parties and religious laws. Look, let me first tell you about the blasphemy law. The blasphemy law was not made by Pakistan, it was made by the British when they were ruling India. And the idea of the blasphemy law was that if one religious community, and remember there were multi-religious communities living in villages. There were Hindus, there were Sikhs, there were Muslims, there were Christians. So if one religious community said something which was derogatory against another religious community of a sacred entity, so there would be riots, there would be a lot of people killed. So the British then brought in this blasphemy law that you were not allowed to say anything derogatory about any religious entity of any other religion. That's how it came about, to stop riots. So therefore, rather than there being lynching crowds and lynching mobs going on and killing people, say, who thought that their religion blasphemy had been committed against them, now it was an offense, so you court to prove that. So that was, and we have had in the past, when someone thinks that our religion has been blasphemed, there've been mob violence. You know, there've been people lynched. And this now is an offense in Pakistan because you have to prove that it's blasphemy. And for that, you have to go to a court.
Very well. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next question is about Turkey. And we have with us Dr. Yasin Aktay. Dr. Aktay is a professor at Bayezid Yildirim University, and also he is a former member of parliament and widely known here in Turkey. Dr. Aktay.
First of all, thank you very much for sharing your very, very valuable perspective with us, and thank to CIGA for gathering us together in this platform. For the past 2 decades, Turkey has become an important and rising power, not only in its region, but also in the Muslim world. I think you can share this idea, this view. The relationship between Pakistan and Turkey is the lasting legacy of Pan-Islamism. The story is well known, as you know. Muslims in the subcontinent supported the Turkish people with their bodies and wealth during the height of colonialism. But in reality today, the Turkish-Pakistan relationship is a failure from many angles. The historical nostalgia has been manipulated by NATO interests, as it was dominated and controlled by the military through the Cold War years. Today, it has resulted in nothing tangible. No visa-free travel, no free trade agreement, no military alliance, no free technology transfer agreement, no people-to-people cooperation, etc. Now my question is coming. Do you feel Pakistan has benefited from Turkey's rise, and if so, how? And do you envision a strategic partnership beyond rhetoric between the two important Muslim states? And lastly, what other Muslim states do you see as strategic partners to Pakistan? Thank you.
Well, first of all, let me say that there's a people-to-people relationship between the people of Turkey and Pakistan, and this again, what you quite rightly pointed out in history, was at a time when in Turkey the Western powers or European powers were about to take over in the 20s or late 1919s and 1920. At the time we were fighting, a lot of the Muslims of India and what is now Pakistan collected a lot of money, and they gave they were standing with the people of Turkey, and I think that's what is remembered in the Turkish mindset. So the relationship is very deep. When I became the Prime Minister, with President Erdogan, I had a very good relationship, and we were trying our best to further our contacts. I was only in power for 3.5 years, and in that time, unfortunately, Corona came in. The 2 years were basically 1.5 years were lost in the coronavirus, and so for our first year we had a bankrupt country, so we were trying to be solvent. So basically, in the last couple of years, we were trying to form what you call trade relationship. We had a committee formed by the president, dealing with the committee formed